On this episode of the Dairyland Initiative podcast, we're going to be talking about automated milking system layouts. Hi, I'm Courtney Hallbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook.
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in.
Well, how you doing, Courtney?
I'm ready for this one because we've been talking about when are we going to get to robots.
Is this like episode 15 or 16? What are we up to?
I think this is 16. So if you had talked to me 6 months ago, back in June, I think it was June, let's do a podcast. Mm-hmm. I was like, we're going to run out of topics by now.
And I've only just started.
You're talking about doing this in retirement too. So.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about robots today. Yeah. We know our listener, they want to hear about robots.
Finally, it's about time.
Finally. There's two logos up on the screen behind us, and so we're going to give a shout out to our friends at 4D Barn, aren't we, Courtney?
Yeah, we've partnered with them now for maybe 10 years.
Probably.
We really wanted to find somebody out there who was going about robot design a little bit differently without having to sell a product. And I think you came across Yoni Pitkaranka at a conference somewhere.
Yep. Met Yoni, 2 Verpes and a Mario.
Yep.
That's what the 4D Barn consists of: nutritionist, veterinarian, architect, consultant, and they've provided a really different perspective for us. Had lots more experience of it than us. You know, Wisconsin was really only just starting to see a significant number of robots, so we needed to go somewhere and learn from someone else that had more experience. But I think we've been able to mix some of our Dairyland Initiative kind of philosophy, and I think maybe they've benefited from that. We've definitely benefited from listening to them, so shout out to them.
But we've put our American spin on some of
we've got a bit of a US spin.
This robot design stuff.
Today, layouts. Tomorrow, all sorts of things.
Something else. But I limited Dr. Cook to just the layout so that we aren't having a 2-hour-long episode.
That's good. I've been told that the episodes are too long, so we're trying to shrink them down a little bit. But there's so much good stuff to cover.
And then there's all this banter.
And then there's banter and jokes. Yeah. What we've learned about robots have been from our friends at 4D Barn, but also a survey that we conducted. And I say we, you did it.
Yes, yeah. And a couple of students. Kyle Carlin went out and really helped get information. But we wanted to know what was going on here in the United States. So I scoured the internet looking for anybody in Wisconsin that had put in robots, looked at social media, and then called people and said, hey, I'm doing this survey. I'm from the University of Wisconsin. Would you be willing to talk to us about your facility design and how
Wisconsin dairymen being open to these kinds of things? They're amenable to us.
So really, thank you to all of the farmers that welcomed us out onto their herds to be a part of the survey. And in the end, I went to about 42 predominantly Holstein herds.
Yeah. Average about 200 cows, so that's kind of a little different from some of the surveys. The Canadian surveys, they tend to average only about 100 cows. So bigger units, mostly new, 83% newly designed, with the sort of typical array of different manufacturers, yeah?
Yep, so most of the farms that we visited had Laley, followed by De Laval, but we also got out to a couple with AMX Galaxies, Gia, and Bomatic. Yep. But our charge, too, for this was to find herds that had been in operation for at least a year. And so on average, most of these were in operation for about 4.
About 4 years, yeah. And so they averaged about 85 pounds of milk, 39 kilos per cow per day, which was better than we'd seen from some of the other surveys, so that was encouraging.
Yep.
But a wide range, we've got robots down at 66 pounds and others at 97. So
with a 2.8 milkings per cow per day.
Yeah. So that's just to give you the backdrop of what we've seen locally. Things to consider when you start to try to work out how to lay an AMS facility out and work out where to put the robots are sorting and handling. You've got to have, again, your philosophy of how are you going to work with the cows.
And I think this is often forgotten about in the design process because it's really easy to just see what other farms have done or get a booklet of pre-made designs, but those designs haven't accounted for how you are going to be managing and working with the cows.
Are you going to use headlocks? Are you going to lock cows up? Are you going to work cows in the pen? Or are you going to try to sort? In which case, what are you going to sort them for? Because we see lots of little sort pens with 3 stalls
that are always empty.
They're always very clean because they're not getting used, and every single robot has one. But I think really some thought about how you're going to handle cows, very important.
Yeah.
Adaptability. You might design and think you're going to go into guided flow, but then decide later to switch to free flow, or vice versa. You want to have the adaptability to be able to do that with your design, and some designs are amenable to that and others are not. We think having a fresh cow pen where cows and heifers in particular are separated from the main group, and this is again a function of robot milking. Got a lot of farms mixing fresh cows in with the main lactating cow population.
Yeah, and that's totally different than what our conventional herds are doing.
Yeah.
But I've also recently gone out to some farms with 10, 12 plus robots who are managing cow groups like they do in their conventional herds. So it's something to do with herd size as well in these AMS
units. It does factor in. But having access to a robot 24/7 for that smaller fresh cow group is important to us. We kind of prioritize that with our designs, having that secondary access.
Yeah, because we can make sure that they have sufficient bunk space and an adequate place to rest. And then, if they need easy access to the robot for more frequent milking, they have it as well.
Yeah, but they're not competing with the main lactating cow group. Or if they're in a separate group, you don't have to bring them to milk them twice a day, which would be, again, more labor. Separating the cows waiting from the cows exiting. You watch enough video of cows around robots. My God, there's a lot of turmoil as these cows exit the robot and compete with the cows waiting.
Not to mention breed effects. Let's talk about those jerseys.
Those bullies.
Oh,
absolute
and just
bullies.
like the repeated visits just for that last piece of pellet.
I watched a video with Yoni in Helsinki the first time I really met him. And he played a video in a little meeting room in the hotel of this cow exiting his brother's robot. She exited 8 times and cycled back in. She'd let one cow go into the robot in between repeated visits because she didn't have permission to milk. So we're like, what the heck's she doing? Well, she'd let one cow in, get feed, and then she'd go and clean up the crumbs. So separating those cows we think is important, as is bunk space allowance. If you heard any of our podcasts, we've droned on about that a lot, and foot bathing. We haven't really got into lameness on our podcasts, but that's an upcoming discussion. But we think you have to have a well-designed foot bath to have a successful robot facility. So those are the things that we're going to think about as you lay these facilities out and decide where to put the robots.
Yeah.
The nomenclature is not clear, so we'll try to use some terms, but there are different terms used in the industry.
Yes, there's nothing that's straightforward.
There are 3 main traffic systems that we've seen in Wisconsin. Free flow, obviously certain manufacturers really push free flow more than guided flow. Guided flow for us is generally designed as a milk first flow system, so that the cow goes to the robot, milks, exits, and then goes to the bunk.
And that free flow system is where a cow has free access to move about the pen, either from the milking to the resting to the eating area.
Yep. And then semi-guided flow is basically guided flow
in a part of the pen,
in a part of the pen,
robot,
with open access to the feed bunk.
Yeah, so typically you'll see the crossover area around the robot being guided flow, where she would have to be milked before she's sorted to the feed bunk. But the crossovers in the opposite end of the pen, furthest from the robots, would not have any traffic system. It would just be open access, so cows can go between the feeding area and the resting area, which we tend to like. When fresh feed is delivered, we want cows to have the ability to access that fresh feed all at once, and so this
But honestly,
allows that.
we went into that survey of yours with drinking the Kool-Aid of free flow is best, and came out thinking all of these systems probably have a part to play, depending on the priorities of the dairy producer.
Mm-hmm. And you can make any of these systems work.
And any of them will fail if you do it wrong.
Always so pessimistic, Dr. Cook.
One of the things I think that we learned, particularly from European designs, is that our traditional barn layout of drive-through feeding isn't necessarily the best way of putting up robot facilities.
Because that center feed lane separates
splits everything.
These pens.
Yeah, and so you have to sort of double up on robot locations to work in, double up on separation pens, and it does have an impact on labor time.
Yeah, and just also trying to move cows between groups.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have pre-fresh on one side of the feed lane and it's a different type of pen, like a calving pen or, I don't know, then how do you move cows between those two groups?
So we definitely learned that when you're thinking robots, put the robots together to optimize labor efficiency, and have outside feed lanes. They can still be covered, but having outer feed lanes tends to lend itself to a little bit more streamlining and better designs, because then you only need one separation area and you can kind of maximize that use of that space.
Much easier to sort cows from the robots, and it condenses your labor into one area of the barn, increasing labor efficiency.
Yeah. So the decision of where to put the feed lane is important. Mm-hmm. So layouts, and again, terminology is not consistent,
Nope.
but we're going to suggest some terms. And the first one is the side layout, and there were a lot of these.
This was like right away when robots were becoming popular here in the United States.
Yep.
It was really common to see side layouts.
Because we could take existing barns and just put a robot room on the side, delete a few stalls, and Bob's your uncle. You were in business. Milking cows with robots.
Yep, and you had easy access to the robot room. You didn't have to walk through the pen to get there. If you had a mechanical ventilation system such as tunnel, it didn't interfere with airflow, but it limits some sorting options.
Yeah, I mean, there's location here for a fetch pen, but the cows tend to sort of mill around in this area. Sorting, beyond one pen, one robot gets really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Foot bathing is a little bit complicated, especially as you put multiple robots in a pen. And so, we saw the initial burst of side layouts, and not too many being built now. Mm-mm. Because as herds have tried to be larger, you definitely sort of compromise in terms of putting these systems together. And you can kind of see that with these pictures, nice, clean layout, good ventilation, as you've talked about, but you start putting multiple robots together and you've got a lot of cows waiting, a lot of cows exiting in the same area, and minimal kind of sort options.
Yeah, and I guess one other pro of the side layout is that you have the automated scraper going in front of the robot, so you don't have to manually scrape.
You don't have to manually scrape a big area there, so that is an advantage. And again, we still have plenty of these barns with this type of layout, and farmers make them work. You can have a side layout, but then kind of build your barn around that so that it creates basically an island in the middle of the barn with quadrants, pens in quadrants, and the cows kind of visit the robot area and then return to their pen. We call that an island because it kind of looks like an island.
Yep.
But this really only works with guided flow.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got kind of a separated commitment pen area and gating to route the cows back into their original pen or into a second pen or separation pen.
But it's nice because you have all of the robots in a central location.
Very efficient for doing the cleaning and doing all that robot maintenance. And one of the barns had a big subway. You actually sort of walked
cool.
below the barn,
went underneath,
and then you
basement.
climbed up ladders into the robot room here. You can kind of see that in this situation. So again, pros and cons of this system, but generally you are locked into a sort of a guided flow scenario here, and we'll just make the comment that with commitment pens, we would like to see a fetch pen within the commitment pen, not just the commitment pen itself, because those areas can be really busy. And when you're bringing up your compromised cow, your lame cow, it would be nice to put that cow in a priority area to have access to the robot. Otherwise,
so she doesn't have to wait too long.
Yeah, otherwise they're competing in that waiting space. Toll booth. Where does this name come from, Courtney?
Is it anything to do with the toll booth system on the Illinois
I think
interstate?
so, yeah. So the characteristic of what we call a toll booth is that the robots are generally at the end of the pen, and the robots are parallel with the feed bunk. So they're in this kind of direction. And it's as if the cows are paying a toll. They're delivering milk, and then the robot lets them proceed down the highway.
Yep, and they're usually sorted out towards the feed bunk after milking.
They exit from a place different from where the cows are waiting, so we like that. And then because they're exiting behind the robot towards the feed lane, there are sorting options. You can put cows into a trim chute area, through a foot bath, into a secondary sort pen, and on the end robot we can give cows secondary access from another like a fresh cow group. So I would say overall we do like this system.
Well, you forgot to mention that we have an increase of bunk space as well by extending that pen.
I wasn't going to forget, Courtney, but
excuse me.
Yeah, you're right there.
Ahead.
You've got all that lovely extra bunk space with this layout too.
Pretty easy to put in on existing facilities as well, because you just extend the end of the barn.
Yes, and you can do guided flow and free flow with this system, so you don't have to be locked into one or the other. This is a finish barn with you can see a fetch pen here. This is the robot on the end with the secondary access for the fresh cow group, and then all the cows are exiting behind the robots in that direction and returning back to the group here, well away from where the cows are waiting.
This is nice, easy cow flow.
Nice, easy cow flow. We talk a lot about that, and it eases management as well. But critical design element, Courtney?
Make sure that lane behind the robot is only wide enough for a single cow.
So they can't turn around, and you'll see gates here to stop cows coming back to the robot. So that is a critical design element, about one cow wide, not multiple cows wide.
We don't want cows congregating back there.
Yeah. So now we have a place for cows to come back and forth and disrupt flow. So you can build a toll booth and get it wrong if you kind of go down this road. So then we came across this terminology from one of our friends at one of the manufacturers. They call this a stacked toll booth.
But in reality, it's more like a crossway.
It's kind of a stacked crossway because the robots are perpendicular to the feed bunk. But this would be a guided flow system where you've got the robots on the end of the pen, and you're just stacking robots perpendicular to the feed lane with sort options and so on. And this would be conducive to sort of larger pens and bigger facilities. And then our 4D barn friends kind of said they took a twist to the toll booth. Yeah, they call this the herringbone. And the original, I think, design for this was from Yoni's brother's barn, and they were dealing with Delaval robots that are a little bit more enclosed than
the entryway is.
Yeah, the entryway is a little more enclosed than the Lellys. So to try to deal with that, what they did was angled the robot, so when the door came open, it was almost a sort of straight shot in for the cows to enter the robot. And then they realized there were some advantages of having that whole thing at that angle for, again, exiting cows toward the feed bunk, having a separation area, a place for a foot bath, being able to sort cows to alternative groups, and having, Courtney, the extra bunk space that you would get with a toll booth layout. So quite a number of advantages with this layout. And we saw several of these in Finland, and I think there's one or two in the US now. It kind of looks cool.
There's a lot more open area around the robot, which if you've got a bunch of cows waiting.
I was just struck by how stress-free and open that waiting area is. Cows are exiting behind here. They go straight into the bunk, and there's always a group of cows sort of
They're
eating.
always eating.
Yeah, that's where you better deliver a little bit more feed down that end of the pen. So we've visited a number of these, not just blue robots, but red ones as well. You can do it with different types, but certainly an option. However, dependent on where you are, there are certain regulations related to clean and safe access. And having a system where you have to cross cow traffic to access the robot, which you do in a toll booth, which we see all over the place, does potentially create some challenges. And this is kind of a stepping stone approach.
Yeah,
to
I think
give
of them
that
as
clean
little
access.
lily pads that you're jumping across.
Yeah.
There's bridges as well.
But you have to make sure that the local regulations allow for this. Yeah. And then we've got the crossway, which is really common. Seen a lot of these type of barns in Canada.
And Europe.
Yeah, and Europe. So what we mean by that is that, again, usually the robot's on the end of the pen and they are perpendicular to the feed lane.
And this creates a lot of open space in front of the robots.
Lots of bunk space?
Lots of bunk space, but then I'm also looking at a pretty large area that's going to have to be manually scraped.
Big area for scraping, and it's perpendicular to your automatic scrapers. So you're doing this by hand.
The other thing is, depending on how those robots are laid out, you might have cows exiting and entering in the same area. So it's better to kind of put them head to head so that the cows are all exiting in one area, and then you have the option to sort in the back.
This area can be really busy. Yeah, this can get quite busy. You're not separating off the exit and entry cows particularly well. So this would be an example, Courtney, of a crossway, and this is the area that you're talking about for
manure scraping.
Manure scraping by hand.
Nice meditative time to scrape crap.
But as I looked at that, I mean, there are sort options. You can kind of pull cows into that back area, potentially have a lane that takes you to another group and so on. So again, an option, but I don't see a good way of putting a foot bath into this pen.
No, and then I'm thinking too, if you're trying to tunnel ventilate this facility, those robot rooms are going to block airflow if you're moving air along the length of the barn. So this is better set up for cross vent.
More of a cross vent, yeah. And this would be an example of a larger facility with a crossway design, where you've got 3 robots on one side and 3 robots on the other side, which is, again, putting that robot room on an island, if you like, with a lot of your activity in one place, but not a lot of sort options with that approach, and precious little option to foot bath. And then we've got the L shape, which is really common. That's got almost the sort of standard offering from at least one of the major manufacturers. So the L shape means that you've got one side robot, so on the side of the barn, and one crossway robot. And you can lay that out head to head or head to tail, so you can kind of do different things.
And I think producers like this layout because it gives cows the option to have a left and right attachment usually.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's really any research out there showing that cows like one attachment tied to another, but that flexibility is what farmers seem to like. Yeah,
and you can have 2 side robots here, or even 3 potentially. Your sort options become really compromised in that scenario. So you can see a fetch pen here, another one here. We can sort out of this robot here, out of this robot here into a secondary handling area or pen. We can give secondary access for cows to the crossway robot for our fresh cows or something like that. But where do you put the foot bath?
Usually in that crossover furthest from the robots, which means that you're going to have to be pushing cows through the foot bath, which means it's probably not going to get done as often as it's
going to be really compromised. You do get the extra bunk space, but you get extra scraping. So, talking about handling manure. So there are, even with the sort of favorite of designs, pretty significant cons as well as the pros that you have to think about when you're making these layout decisions.
Yeah, and depending on how you lay out the L-shaped robots, you can do it head to tail, head to head, and depending on how you do this, it's going to influence where cows are waiting to be milked and exiting.
Yeah, so good for sorting, not so good for plunking the exiting cow right where the cows are waiting for the next robot. So you create a lot of busy traffic there.
And that's in the head to tail layout.
The head to tail. Head to head, you kind of minimize your sorting to one location and have the waiting cows somewhat separated. But the exiting cows still have to sort of find their way out of there.
Yeah.
So back into the main part of the pen. So Courtney, I think to summarize, as we think about some of our major priorities, the extended bunk space is obvious and easy in an L-shape crossway and toll booth.
Yep.
You kind of see that extra space, and from our pen design elements
you're getting
podcast,
that from the crossovers and
about
the
20
robot
feet,
room.
remember, about 6 meters, 20 feet to the nearest stall from the robot, so we're getting extra bunk space there. So that's why you don't default to 2-row, because you can actually get pretty good bunk space in these robot facilities when you use these certain layouts because of that extra crossover. And the secondary access are available for those fresh cows. Using a toll booth or crossway robot, you can put one of these swing gates here that can give that group 24/7 access.
Yeah, so you've got cows coming in from the milking pen as well as the fresh pen, and best of both worlds. Dual purpose for that robot.
At a later episode, we'll talk about where not to put that gate, and that's not particularly well designed in the example that we're showing here, because it does create for competition. So there are ways of doing that that'll lessen that issue. And then just thinking about sorting and working with the cows and cow flow.
And thinking about how one person can move cows in the pen.
Gating is what we learned from the 4D barn group. Gating is really important in these facilities. Custom design gates so that one person can do all the labor easily in a reasonable amount of time. This just highlights this sort of exit lane behind the toll booth system, where we can go to a trim chute, through a foot bath, return to the main pen, or be sorted into a secondary pen. And that top robot, that's the one that we can cycle cows from a secondary fresh cow pen through that robot and return to that pen. It's always the robot in the opposite direction from the cow flow that we can do that with. And this is my biggest bugbear. I mean, I try to help farms prevent lameness, and in our environments, we need to foot bath cows.
And in its conventional facilities, it's so easy. You put the foot bath in an exit lane from the parlor.
And the default for these crossway L-shape layouts, which are common, is to plunk the foot bath in the far crossover. And the idea is that every day you close a gate and you cycle the cows and you move the cows through this foot bath. Nobody wants to do that.
No. And they say they're going to do it, and then it actually
they will
happen.
all have the best of intentions to do it, but it's miserable doing that. And if you're only doing it on bedding day, that's only once a week. We're looking to foot bath 3 or 4 times a week. So I think you have to design a robot facility that sorts cows through the robot, because I don't particularly want to foot bath a cow 6 times a day either.
Definitely not.
So can you have a sort gate and sort the cows that you want to foot bath when you want to foot bath? You can do that in a number of layouts. This was one of the early attempts of this side layout design. When you've only got one robot per pen, you can sort the exiting cows through a centrally located robot that's kind of basically in the middle of the center crossover.
A centrally located foot bath between those 2 robots.
Yeah. So, but you're not really kind of sorting the cows in there. There's no sort gate. They're just exiting as they attend the robot. They will walk through the foot bath, and maybe one week you'll do one side, another week you'll do the other side, or alternate days. So it wasn't a great solution, but it was a solution. With the toll booth, as we've shown, with the guided flow island type systems, and with the herringbone layout, there is a place where we can sort cows through a footpath.
Yeah, and this is either going through a sort gate or putting a gate down on footpath days to redirect cows through a footpath.
Yeah. So there are a number of options available to us with those layouts. So when you review all this and you start thinking, okay, what are my priorities for sorting and handling, for traffic system flexibility, to make sure I've got enough bunk space, that I can footbath cows, that I have secondary access for fresh cows, it kind of points you in the direction of maybe one layout.
And I know what that layout is, and that's your favorite.
It is the sort of toll booth stroke herringbone type layout. That it gives us the most flexibility. And that's why I think we've started to see more of those layouts, because I think people are kind of understanding how to put these systems together, and toll booths do give them that flexibility. So there are workarounds for a lot of the other layouts, but it is relatively easy for that one. So one advantage of the toll booth that we didn't mention, you can add it on to the end of an existing barn. You don't have to build a new facility. We've got lots of 4 and 6 row barns that we could add 60 to 80 feet on the end, add robots, and you're in business.
Yep.
So with that, Courtney?
I think we have a general sense now of what the 6 common layouts are, the pros and cons of each, really prioritizing having cow flow around the robot area, whether it's with a secondary group, keeping cows entering and exiting in different locations, getting more feed bug space, having optimal sort options, especially when it comes to foot bathing, and really go from there.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, SureGain Trow Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.